Polls. Now, I'm not talking about tolls because people have to pay your toll tax and everything else. I know some states have double taxing tolls, and geez, between Texas, New York, well, just that's a different day to Massachusetts. Hey, but I'm talking about polls. Did you know those polls that you see, Pew Research polls and all this stuff? Where do they get them? Well, they collect a lot of data from various researchers. Sometimes it's just calling up people randomly, sending out statistical information after they've had, like, say you go to your doctor, you see it at like reviews and stuff. They collect all that data. Yeah, there's a lot to polls, and let me just show you a few things, and then we're going to discuss one thing in particular that you're all pissed off at. I know you don't want to talk about that too. So there are legitimate companies conduct polls to measure public opinion, consumer preference, demographic trends, applying strict statistical methods. I always talk about statisticians. I work with statisticians and actuaries and underwriters. Mathematical, you know, exact information is driven and it's mathematically derived. They do not simply collect answers, they use mathematical formulas. There you go, I've been telling you. Behind even this everything is math. Oh, even behind you, Google and Oracle and the rest of you is math. And I worked on those calculations, by the way, in a different line of business, but I actually created algebraic and trigonometry formulas for pensions when I first came out of college. Calculate the margin of error, estimate confidence levels, and weight the data to accurately represent the entire population. So the types of polls are election political polls, measure voter sentiment. Market research polls use business to determine consumer preferences. There's consumer food and market research polls. And of course, I said campaign election polls. Measuring satisfaction of products, food quality, habits. You'd be shocked about this. Is what we talk about with these data collections, data centers that are actually speeding up, collecting all this information. They're just basically data collections, which people did truly almost manually at one point. And many firms pay big money, marketing money. For marketing purposes, they pay big money for this stuff. And then even during the election seasons, pollsters use benchmark, brush fire, and tracking polls to measure candidate popularity and issue. They're typically conducted in random ways, digit dialing or specialized voter panels, where you're not usually open to the general public. Organizations like 55-8 aggregate those scientific polls rather than hosting them. And then there's how they take these polls. They're using random digital dialing. They also do photo panels that are not usually open to the general public to sign up open to the general public to sign up on a whim. Organizations like 5038 aggregate those scientific polls and rather hosting them. Straw polls, open web surveys, social media polls gauge immediate informal opinions but are considered unscientific, but because the participants are not randomized, you have to get a random group of people from all demographic backgrounds, so forth and so on. And of course, you could take them constantly across everyday platforms like X, Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. Well, AKA what used to be Twitter. That lawsuit. Elon, you didn't win. This is Pew, and there you can actually go on the Pew site. How Americans feel about religion, influence in government and public life. 61% of U.S. adults say religion is losing influence in American life. 37% say it's gaining influence. So this is all. You can go to different sites that actually can give you data on, like this. Like I said, this Pew Center, the Pew Research Center, and you could basically look at different pollings that have taken place. But there's one in particular I want to bring. Americans see healthcare costs, deficit, inflation as big problems facing the nation. This was done May 11th. And this is significant because this is what news is touting and broadcasting about how all of you feel. I mean, the majority of people feel about the cost of healthcare, inflation, rising prices of gas and food. And there are significant indicators taking place. 61% of Americans, this is New York Times, said they had to cut back on groceries. Yes, see, I told you, when you start, look at this carriage is pretty full. When you start cutting into people's, basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, That's when it becomes a big problem, no matter what your politics are, no matter how much they tout things are going to get better. Um, you know, a gallon of gas is still over $4. Um, Food prices are cutting into people's, you know, day to day expenses. Rising cost of energy. That's why those data centers are scaring the hell. I told you 50,000 people in Lake Tahoe have to think next year where they're going to get their energy source because the Nevada Energy, NV Energy, is cutting them off. People panic, but also people weigh in on this, and it doesn't go away. Politicians can't just make it go away. Make people feel better, like it's not a big deal, when it really is a big deal. So it comes back to GDP. Gross domestic product is a flawed measure of prosperity. Alternatives are on the way because there's different weights and measures as to what people consider prosperous. 1% will tell you they're doing perfectly fine. But for the majority of people, I told you this is really a class war between the have and have-nots, aren't feeling that same twinge because the stock market, stocks went up. I've told you, most average Americans invest in mutual funds, and they're not stock heavy. So just make that quite clear. And that's not an indicator that the economy is doing well. So the question is, not taking the average American citizen, the average voter for granted, because we're watching. I told you we are always watching, and we can't be convinced otherwise when we already know what's affecting our bottom line, our pocket. And the question is that if this continues to roll out, not just the war, but the cost of things going up in inflation, it will make a difference to all of us when it comes to the propaganda that the government wants to push up to all of us. And you all know it. That's all.